So when Bill Mitchell came back from the Turin show, of course, I'm a sort of a young designer down in this advanced concept studio. I'd never met any of the top people in the design area, and Bill Mitchell comes in. Of course, we recognized him. There were three of us in there, and we were absolutely impressed that Bill Mitchell would be coming down to our studio and to talk to us. And Bill Mitchell was a really gregarious, fun guy to be around, as opposed to Harley Earl, who was very, very aloof, never spoke to his designers, always walked with a retinue of lieutenants behind him. And if he wanted something done, he would talk to a lieutenant, and the lieutenant would transfer his idea to whatever was going on. Bill Mitchell, on the other hand, said, "Guys, come over here, sit down. I want to talk to you." So, of course, we all did. We all sat down. And we didn't know what direction Bill was even talking about because, we'd heard the program had been killed or whatever. And he explained that he'd just been over the Turin show and began pulling some pictures out of his wallet and laying them out on the table. And, pretty soon we got the idea. He was talking about redesigning a new Corvette, and he wanted us to do the car. And we're looking at each other. There is no way that this is real. Or maybe he's done this with several other studios. There's some trick going on here. Bill Mitchell does not come in, talk to three young designers who have no experience and talk about designing a new Corvette. But that's exactly what he wanted to do. And he laid these cars out and laid out the theme and explained what was important to him in terms of the aesthetics of this new automobile with this very beautiful aerodynamic shape, the air shaped over each wheel, and the fact that it was a coupe. So he explained what he wanted to do. He gave us the lead on the design, which direction he wanted to go, and said, "It's up to you. Put your work up on the wall, see what we can do with it, and I'll be back in a couple of days and see where it goes." And he left, and we're all looking at each other and not believing that Bill Mitchell has come in and asked us to design the new Corvette, knowing, of course, that management had killed off the program. And of course, it was important. The reason that Bill Mitchell had selected doing it downstairs in Research B in the studio was that the top executives would never go down there. They would go into the production studios upstairs, could see what the new cars were. But the advanced concept stuff was far beyond them and not really of any interest. So he knew that in doing this car in secret in Research B, he'd be able to get the car completed. So to make a long story short, he came back the next few days and we, of course, papered the walls and the whole place with ideas off the theme that he had done. And Bill Mitchell had just an incredibly great eye. He slowly walked around the studio, looked at everything that was on the wall, finally walked around the second time and pulled a sketch off the wall and said, "Who did this?" And I raised my hand. I said, "I did." He said, "Okay, all the rest of you guys, you see this? This is the best interpretation of what I want to go. Now it's your job to do something better than this. And this is a theme we want to continue on with it. And I'll be back in a week." So again, this was a repeat. We went back, did all of our best work, put it back up on, and did more on that theme. Bill Mitchell came back in again, did the same thing, walked around, pulled the sketch off the wall and said, "Who did this?" I raised my hand and said, "It's mine." And he said, "Okay, this is it. This is the direction of the new car that we're going to build." And if you look at that sketch that was done in November of 1957, it took 6 years, but that became the 1963 Corvette. I mean, every line on it is there. And that's directly at Bill Mitchell's design direction. I'm interpreting what he wanted, but it was his idea of what to do with the car. So at that point, we got into building a fifth scale model on it. And he was really pleased with that. And he sort of gave me the direction of being the design leader on it. And we got to go ahead and build a full-scale clay on the car. And at this point, I began to have some doubts about the direction that we were going to go, because I'd really become very involved in what I thought the shape should be on it. If you look at the lines of the 63 Corvette, if you look at that crisp line that goes all the way around the car, it falls off at the rear and goes down. And this is very much from the influence of the 30s of Bill Mitchell's idea of what great design was, that everything had gone back to a full taper on the car. And I knew from my experience that was not going to work, that it was aerodynamically going to be unstable on it. So I had began trying to change that line and bring it back up each time that we were doing one side of the car and one side of the car. And he came in and he said, you know, I don't want this line to run uphill at the back end. And I kept, you know, trying to put it in there, and I explained why. And I had explained to Mr. Mitchell that, you know, during my lunch hours, I had been spending time in the library. At that time, it had not been finished. Remember that the tech center had just been finished in 1957, so it was not completed. The library was not done yet. There were still books on the floor or whatever. But I'd go down there at lunchtime and I'd look through everything I could find. And I had found a set of papers in mimeograph form that had been copied off the German original technical paper. It had been done by Reinhard König von Fauschenfeld in probably 1935, explaining his ideas on aerodynamics. And I couldn't read the German, but I could look at the numbers, and we're looking at stuff that is so advanced. I mean, we're comparing 1935 automobiles with what he wanted to do. And it was so far in the future that nobody could even conceive of that it was possible what he wanted to do. But he wanted to get a patent on this, and he had applied to the German Technical Society to do this. And they saw the value in what he wanted to do, but they would not give him the patent on it because he had not yet completed college. Now, he was a fairly wealthy young aristocrat and wanted to race motorcycles. So he had gone around to some of the German motorcycle factories trying to get some support for his ideas. And of course, if anybody that's been in racing knows that a privateer does not get stuff out of the factories. The factories are going to have all the trick stuff and be the fastest. So they basically blew him off and wouldn't give him any help at all. So what he did is he went over to England and bought an English-built bike, put his ideas into it, and won the world's German championship in 1924. So this, of course, really impressed him. And then he had these papers, ideas of what he wanted to do. And so they said, well, look, we'll put you under our studio that is being done for the development of aerodynamics, both automotive and airplanes, under Wunderbaum Kamm. So he went in there as an intern and became a personal assistant to Dr. Kamm. And the two of them began developing what they called at that time the K-line tail. And they did several of these cars, the K1, K2, K3, K4. And they were getting some support from some of the other German manufacturers just to do test ideas on it. But the ideas were so far beyond what anybody else in the conventional world of the 30s were doing that there was no way that they would risk building an automobile that looked like that. But in the testing, and they'd gone out and done it, the cars were very, very successful. So in the combination of papers that had been done, evidently our military had gone through everything that looked important, copied it down on mimeograph. This is that old, purple line mimeograph stuff, and probably made copies and gave one to each automotive manufacturer. And I just happened to find that sheet of paper stuck between some books, and nobody had ever looked at it or paid any attention. And I looked at the numbers, and I was absolutely impressed with what they were doing. So I, went back to Mr. Mitchell explained about the lines going up at the back end and down on the front end. And, he was very nice. He put his arm around my shoulder and kind of walked me over in the corner of the room. He says, "Kid," he said, "I want you to know that I designed the Corvettes here, and I want you to do exactly what I tell you." And that was my instruction from Mr. Mitchell. So we went back and designed the line down on the back end. The interesting thing was when we first ran the car in 1959, very first time we had it out, the car was so unstable that Dr. Dick Thompson, who was driving it, was actually black flagged for erratic driving. The front wheels had come off the ground at about 140. And so they black flagged him. And now the guys that are close on this design, we go back to Tony Lapine, this engineer that had originally, been in this project with Mr. Earl and now Mr. Mitchell. So he had convinced them that they should continue on the development of that. So Mitchell was able to buy one of the 3 chassis that was built, and this special new Corvette that I designed for Mitchell was built on that chassis. And that became the XP87 Corvette prototype. Still one of the most beautiful cars ever came out of General Motors, and probably made a name for Bill Mitchell over any other car better than the Riviera or anything else. But anyway, the car was not very stable when we first ran it. And as I said, Dick Thompson was black flagged. So the next race, Tony Lapine drove the car, and they had brought the front end down on it and made some improvements on it. So the car went on to win the national championship deep production for modified cars. And but the important thing was when the car showed up from a public standpoint, it created such a furor. I mean, that XP87 was such an incredible design when it first showed up, and the publicity was so good that it actually convinced General Motors to let Bill Mitchell go back and build the car. So from that first time it ran in 59 until the time it was completed in 63, it went through a lot of different stages. And during that period of time, when we were first doing the car, management discovered what was going on with Bill Mitchell doing the car, and they came to him. And of course, they were really very, very upset that he had gone directly against management's outlines on it. They said, if you want to finish this car, you cannot put the Chevrolet name on it. You cannot put the Corvette name on it, and you'll have to pay for it out of your own pocket. And that's exactly what happened. So they made a special studio, took it off the campus of Tech Center, had his own separate studio built over on the side on that point. And at that point, Tony Lapine and Larry Shinoda came back in and finished the car up because we could not finish it as a coupe. There wasn't enough money to do it. For Bill Mitchell didn't have enough money to do the car. So at that point, Mitchell decided that he would call the car the Stingray. So that's where the name came from, because he was a really great deep sea fisherman guy and had a great love of aquatic design and stuff, and invented the name Stingray for the car.